Today's topic. In many countries, urban populations are expanding rapidly as people migrate from rural areas in search of better employment opportunities and living standards. Some argue that governments should invest heavily in developing rural regions to discourage this movement, while others believe that expanding and improving existing cities is a more practical solution. Discuss both views and give your own opinion. Here is a Band 9 model essay on this topic. Read it carefully, because after we finish the essay, I will break down every part of it so you understand exactly what makes it Band 9. If you are new here, subscribe now. This channel will help you improve your IELTS band score. As hundreds of millions of people continue to leave the countryside in search of better opportunities, policymakers face a fundamental choice between revitalizing peripheral regions and strengthening the cities that are already absorbing this movement. While rural development deserves serious consideration, this essay argues that directing investment toward well-governed urban centers represents the more pragmatic and economically sound response to the pressures of internal migration. Those who advocate rural investment base their argument on a principle that is difficult to dismiss. When governments channel resources into agricultural modernization, local enterprise, and rural connectivity, they create the conditions under which residents no longer feel compelled to leave their home communities. It is the chronic absence of viable livelihoods, rather than any innate preference for city life, that pushes the majority of rural to urban migrants through the gates of the metropolis. In countries where targeted infrastructure spending has narrowed the opportunity gap between towns and cities, populations have indeed stabilized, and local economies have gained a degree of self-sustaining momentum. Rural development, in this sense, addresses the problem at its source rather than managing its consequences downstream. Nevertheless, the concentration of talent, capital, and institutional capacity within cities means that urban investment, if undertaken with genuine foresight, generates far greater returns than equivalent spending dispersed across rural communities. The densification of urban housing, the expansion of mass transit corridors, and the systematic provision of schools and healthcare represent measures that can accommodate population growth without proportionally increasing per capita expenditure. Cities that have integrated rail, bus, and cycling networks demonstrate that mobility need not deteriorate as populations rise, provided that planning precedes rather than reacts to growth. Furthermore, the agglomeration of skilled workers, research institutions, and diverse industries within urban centers produces a kind of economic synergy that even well-funded rural settlements are structurally unable to replicate. It is this density of interconnected capability, not the physical size of a city, that drives the productivity gains on which broad-based prosperity ultimately depends. In conclusion, rural development is neither misguided nor wasteful, but the weight of economic evidence firmly supports prioritizing investment in urban capacity as the more effective and lasting response to internal migration. Governments that plan their cities for the populations those cities will have, rather than those they currently hold, are best positioned to transform demographic pressure into lasting economic opportunity for all citizens. Now let us break the essay down, paragraph by paragraph, and understand precisely what earns each section its marks. The introduction does two things in 2 sentences, and both sentences are doing real work. The first sentence reframes the question. Instead of simply restating the prompt, it elevates the language immediately. The phrase revitalizing peripheral regions replaces the prompt's developing rural regions, and the phrase absorbing this movement captures the idea of cities receiving migrants without repeating the original wording. This signals to the examiner from the very first line that the candidate controls their vocabulary rather than borrowing the question's words. The second sentence delivers a clear, direct thesis. Notice that the position is stated without hesitation. This essay argues that is a clean, confident construction. There is no hedging language like it could be argued or some may say. The candidate owns the position immediately, and the examiner knows exactly what the next 3 paragraphs will support. The first body paragraph presents the case for rural investment fairly and fully. This is important because the task asks you to discuss both views. A common mistake in IELTS essays is to spend 3 lines on the opposing view and then dismiss it immediately. That is not discussing both views. It is dismissing one. This paragraph gives the rural development argument real intellectual weight. The idea that migration is driven by chronic absence of viable livelihoods, rather than any innate preference for city life, is a precise and credible claim. The phrase, chronic absence, is specific. It implies that the problem is structural and long-standing, not accidental. The paragraph ends by noting that rural development addresses the problem at its source, rather than managing its consequences downstream. That contrast between source and downstream is a coherence device that sets up the transition to the next paragraph neatly. If this is already clearer than what you have been writing, hit the like button. It helps me grow and produce better videos for you. The second body paragraph is where the essay makes its own argument, and it is the strongest paragraph in the essay. It opens with "nevertheless," which signals a concession and a pivot in a single word. The paragraph then builds its case through 3 connected claims. First, urban investment generates greater returns because of concentrated capacity. Second, specific urban improvements such as housing, transit, schools, and healthcare can accommodate growth efficiently. Third, the agglomeration of skilled workers and industries creates economic synergy that rural areas cannot replicate. Each sentence extends the logic of the previous one. This is what Band 9 coherence looks like. It is not simply a list of reasons. It is a chain of reasoning where each idea grows out of the one before it. The paragraph ends with a sentence that lifts the argument to a higher level of analysis. It is density of interconnected capability, not physical size, that drives productivity. That kind of analytical precision is what separates a Band 8 response from a Band 9 one. The conclusion is short and controlled. It does not introduce new information. It acknowledges the merit of the opposing view with rural development, is neither misguided nor wasteful, and then restates the thesis with a fresh formulation. The final sentence is worth examining closely. Governments that plan their cities for the populations those cities will have, rather than those they currently hold. That sentence packs a great deal of meaning into a tight grammatical structure, and it ends the essay on a note of forward-looking analysis rather than a simple summary. Now let us look at vocabulary. The essay avoids the kind of vocabulary that sounds advanced but means very little. Every word is chosen for precision. Revitalizing peripheral regions is more accurate than improving rural areas, because peripheral implies geographical and economic distance from centers of power, which is exactly the relationship being described. Viable livelihoods is stronger than good jobs because it captures the idea of economic sustainability rather than just employment. Agglomeration is a technical term from economics, and it is used correctly to refer to the productive benefits of geographic clustering. Per capita expenditure is precise financial language used in exactly the right context. None of these words are there for decoration. They each carry meaning that a simpler word would lose. Now let us look at grammar. The audit of this essay reveals several structures used correctly and naturally throughout. The first structure is the complex noun phrase. Consider this example from the essay: the concentration of talent, capital, and institutional capacity within cities. The noun head is concentration. It is preceded by the article the and, followed by a prepositional phrase, a three-part list, and a locative phrase. That is a sophisticated noun phrase, and it is the kind of construction that the grammar examiner looks for. The second structure is the relative clause. Look at this example. The agglomeration of skilled workers, research institutions, and diverse industries within urban centers produces a kind of economic synergy that even well-funded rural settlements are structurally unable to replicate. The relative clause beginning with that modifies synergy and adds specific content to the noun it follows. It is a defining relative clause used accurately. The third structure is the fronted adverbial. Consider, in countries where targeted infrastructure spending has narrowed the opportunity gap between towns and cities, populations have indeed stabilized. The prepositional phrase, in countries, opens the sentence before the main clause, creating natural sentence-level variety and signaling contrast with what came before. The fourth structure is the concessive clause. Look at this example. While rural development deserves serious consideration, this essay argues that directing investment toward well-governed urban centers represents the more pragmatic and economically sound response. The concessive clause, introduced by Weil, acknowledges the opposing view before asserting the main position. It is used in the introduction to give the thesis immediate analytical credibility. The fifth structure is the conditional construction. Consider, provided that planning precedes rather than reacts to growth. The phrase provided that functions as a conditional, meaning the stated outcome is contingent on a specific condition being met. It is a more precise and sophisticated alternative to if, and it is used here correctly to qualify a claim. So, what makes this essay Band 9? 5 things working together. First, the position is clear and consistent from the introduction to the conclusion. The examiner never has to guess where the candidate stands. Second, every paragraph develops a coherent argument rather than listing points. Each sentence earns its place by extending the logic of what came before. Third, the vocabulary is precise and purposeful. No word is included simply because it sounds academic. Fourth, the grammar is varied and accurate. Complex structures appear throughout, and none of them contain errors. Fifth, the essay addresses both views seriously. The opposing view is given genuine intellectual engagement, not a token mention. That is how you write a Band 9 response on this topic. Study the essay, return to this breakdown, and apply the same principles to your next practice essay. I will see you in the next video.